could talk about the Reynolds case. Little news on that today. It was thrown out by the Office of Lawyer Regulation. But in your mind, is this settled at this point? Mr. Schimmel has said flat out you've lied about the facts in this case. These facts have been known for some time, and yet at the debate last night, yesterday afternoon, it looked as if you did get some of the dates wrong.
Right. Sure.
What happened there?
Well, with regard to your first part of the question, with the Office of Lawyer Regulation dismissing the complaint, I'm obviously pleased. It's what I expected because I appropriately had no involvement in that case. I screened myself off as soon as I saw the name, and it was assigned to another assistant district attorney in the office, which is what our ethical rules require, which I believe is why the Office of Lawyer Regulation did in fact dismiss that complaint. And part of my speaking about the dates is precisely because I wasn't involved in that case. It wasn't any sort of intentional statement. When I looked back at the case, I'm thinking 2014, and I misspoke when I said that it had been referred in 2013. It was resolved in 2013. And so the point of all of this, though, is that I handled that case in terms of when it came in, screening myself off in the exact way that the ethical rules require. And it isn't different. I respectfully disagree with Brad Schimmel that it's any different than his office continuing to prosecute the Bill Kramer case, which is another sexual assault case involving a Republican who's donated to Mr. Schimmel's campaign. He screened himself off. I think that was appropriate. And so, I haven't sought to make this any sort of gotcha moment or to seek any sort of advantage on that to say, oh, look, he's done something wrong, because that's what our ethical rules require. Because when you work in communities like we do, you are often going to have, some knowledge of a person, whether they go to your church or they've grown up in the community with you, or, someone knows a family member. And so it's inherent on district attorneys to know when it is that we refer cases out and when we keep them. And I've done that several times where I've referred cases out for special prosecution. Brad Schimmel's sent, more than a dozen cases over to my office for special prosecution. And so I think we both know when it's required for us to have a special prosecutor.
But in the end, in this case, he was treated pretty leniently because after a year, the charges against him were reduced.
A little bit of context for our viewers about Reynolds and the case.
In what way?
Just this was an individual that you had a business interest, and your husband had a business interest with at one point, and then he was
land contract that you had with you and your husband had
just for those who haven't followed
with Mr. Reynolds, and during and you had a land contract with him, and the contract I believe was between 2009 and 2012. Previous to that, there had been some allegations of sexual misconduct by Mr. Reynolds. The case came to your to you in 2012, I believe. So that's the background to this case.
Sorry.
And just one detail. You said the case was resolved in 2013. I don't think it was resolved until this year, right? The deferred prosecution agreement's from March.
Right. 2013 was when the case was actually charged out.
Right, it was charged out.
And then there was a deferred prosecution agreement, thank you, that was approved by a judge this year.
I guess the remaining question I had is that in the end, many people believe that he got off pretty well on this. And are you pleased, even though you weren't directly involved in this case, had no involvement at all, are you pleased with the outcome of this case and how it was handled in terms of the penalty that he received?
Well, and I can't speak to that, first of all, because it's not closed, it's open. That's what a deferred prosecution agreement is. So someone stays open on a bond with the charges still pending, sort of in limbo a little bit. So that if someone is removed from their diversion agreement, for example, they can be, the case starts up again. And so I have to be careful. But the reality is I don't have the facts of the case because I screened myself off. That's why the dates do get difficult for me, because this is a case where I was not involved. And so I don't know all of the complexities that went into the case, other than literally what I've read in the press and what has been spoken about publicly. And so this is a case, like many, I can talk in generalities, when you have delayed reporting, of a sex crime, and I think these allegations were from a number of years prior, it becomes complicated, and there were familial complexities in terms of the victim and a divorce and things of that nature. And so I can't speak to why the case evolved the way it did. What I can say is this: is that there was oversight because the court approved of this, agreement, and so that's something where I can't speak to all the specifics simply because I was not involved. And so I think it's really hard, and I think the campaigns and the parties could go back and forth frequently and try to take cases, piece by piece and perhaps out of context. And I think that would be a disservice both to Brad Schimmel and myself, but also to the voters, because we've both been practicing a really long time. And so you can't just take a case and say, well, it was a sexual assault case and now it's potentially resolved in a certain fashion. I think that's unfair to do that.